Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing today?
Good.
So I guess it's technically 4:03. So we're going to begin this thing. We're here to talk about career pivots. And when the topics came up, this is the one I thought that fit me because I literally took a career pivot within the time we were starting to plan the summit to now. So I've shifted from the advertising industry back onto the brand side. I'm a head of design and merchandising and product for Tecovas. And this panel, it will be discussing pivots in your career within and without your industry. And I think we have an amazing panel here of people that have really made significant moves that are outside the box, and we're here to tell their stories. We have Mamthaz, Raghu, Krystie, and Christine. And what I'll do is I'll let them introduce themselves to you. Why don't we, I don't know whose screen in what direction, but let's go with Mamthaz. I'll tag you and then you can tag the next person.
Thank you, Paul. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, cool. Hi, my name is Mamthaz Sinha. I consider myself a global citizen and would love to live in a world that's without boundaries. I was born in India and lived half my life there. And the next half, I've split time between US, UK, and Asia. In the summer of last year, we moved to San Jose, the Bay Area, and have been enjoying the famous California sun ever since. My career journey is from mainframes to metaverse. Like a good Asian Indian child, I studied STEM, got an engineering degree, and started off as a software developer. But I've dabbled in many different things and don't believe in settling down. Change is the only thing that keeps my enthusiasm constant. So thank you so much for having me here and looking forward to having an engaging conversation.
Why don't we go to Krystie?
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Krystie, pronouns she, her. I'm the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Slant'd, an Asian American storytelling collective that celebrates Asian American identity. So I'm wearing my big Asian earrings. I always wear big Asian earrings for any Asian American celebration. So I'm actually Taiwanese Thai American. I was California born and raised, but I always say that my heart and soul is in New York. I had just moved back to LA last year. And I've been trying to find my creative community ever since. This morning, when I was thinking about prep for this panel, I was thinking about all the different pivots I've made, and I didn't realize how many I made until I sat down and wrote it on paper. I've made 7 so far. So similar to Mamthaz, I kind of went down a traditional Asian American route or Asian route. I wasn't qualified enough to be a doctor, so the next best thing was going to be a lawyer. My mom said I love to argue, so she was like, why don't you try being a lawyer? That didn't work out, so I decided to pursue business. And so after graduation, I went into one of the common routes of management consulting. From there, I jumped into advertising in the strategy space, then moved into brand strategy, then entrepreneurship for publishing and community building, which is where Slant'd sits. And then I moved into freelancing. And then I went into in-house content and community building at a startup. And similar to Paul, I actually had a pivot as this panel was being formed. And I actually quit my job at the startup and am now back to entrepreneurship to focus on Slant'd full-time. So yeah, that's a total of 7 pivots. So I'm excited to share whatever I've learned. Feel free to ask questions throughout. But thank you for having me today. And then I'll popcorn it off to Raghu.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? My name is Raghu. I am the founder of PopShift Media. We are a South Asian storytelling platform. I started PopShift a few years ago, and we just released our first show called They See Me Dating, which focuses on South Asian American relationships in America. So that was really cool. So I feel like my entire life, I've made so many pivots, not just career-wise, but life-wise. I was born in India. I lived there for 10 years of my life, and then I moved here in middle school. And once I got here, I felt like, that was the biggest change in my life. When I thought I knew something about life, I moved to a different place with no friends, no family or anything like that. So I was just trying to fit in for most of my life. So, I went the traditional path of going to business school. And then after business school, I did a variety of jobs from supply chain to finally ending up as a product manager in technology. And then finally, I just realized, it made me, something just kept bringing me back to like my creative edge and creating things. And I feel like by the time I realized it, I already finished school and graduated. So I didn't really get to make a lot of the choices. I was just following what other people have kind of set for me. So then finally, right before COVID hit, actually, I quit my full-time job and I started my media company, which is probably one of the worst times to probably quit your job at. But it taught me a lot, and I feel like it was kind of a rough start, but I'm excited to be on this journey and hopefully share some of my learnings with you today.
Fantastic. We'll jump to Krystie.
Hi guys, I'll keep it nice and sweet and short. I'm Krystie Behrens. I'm part of the business development team at Publicis Group, and I've been with Publicis Group for about 8 years. I've started in HR on the generalist side, then I went to campus recruiting, and then I went to project management for business development, and now I'm in production for business development. So a lot of different things. Probably most proud of is that my career has been with Publicis, which is something I've always wanted. I'm first generation Korean American. I graduated with an organizational comms major degree, whatever the F that means, but something pretty generic so I could pivot essentially. And then, my route to where I am today is probably a bit different, and hopefully some people, in this summit can relate, but I took like a 5-year gap break before I obtained my bachelor's degree. I went 1 year and wasn't ready. I knew that. And born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, OHIO, Buckeye fans. Yeah, big football fan, but I'm excited. It's been a great inspirational day. So hopefully we can close out with a bang. Yeah.
Of course. So quick on me. I'm Korean American as well. I was born here. My parents immigrated here, and I was headed to medical school, and my dad got sick. He had moved back to Korea with my mom, and in Korea, the family does all the nursing. So my brother and I dropped everything. And a few years later, when I came back and I was interviewing for medical schools, got in, and the smell of hospitals would make me nauseous. So I took a temp job in the fashion industry, and I kept deferring the start of school for 2 years. And then finally they said, we don't want you here anymore anyway. And so I pivoted into the fashion industry. I designed without any design degree. I have a biochemistry degree, a biology degree. So I just say that because you shouldn't. Asians, I feel like they have a prescribed path towards success, and that if you deviate from that path, you're doomed to failure. And I think it's exciting to kind of break out of that and realize that there's examples out there and there's case studies. I mean, real people who have achieved great things jumping off the path that was defined for them. And so I'm going to go through some questions for the panel, and we'll kind of rotate through, and hopefully the conversation becomes interesting. And panelists, feel free to jump in and ask each other questions as you go along. I'm going to, let's see. I'll start out with Krystie. By the way, I'm going to go back and try to figure out how many times I've pivoted. Like 7? Okay. Making any career change involves risk. How did you know when the risk was worth taking?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, okay, at the risk, I'm just gonna put this out there as a caveat. At the risk of sounding woo-woo, the moment that sparked each of these 7 pivots really happened when I dropped into my body, specifically to like listen, to really deeply listen to what my soul wanted. And, you know, Paul, you mentioned just like as being Asian, a lot of times we're prescribed certain career paths or certain ways of thinking and being. And there's also a lot of like cultural nuances weaved into that. Things like a lot of shoulds and things that we need to do, filial piety, all of these things. I think when you really tap into your true desire and you think about your shoulds versus your musts, and you strip that all away and you think about what does your most authentic self need and want, I think that's where like I was able to tap in and realize that risk was worth taking. I mentioned earlier that I recently made a pivot, so back into entrepreneurship, and that actually happened, I wanted to say in February. So I was on a mini vacation that my sister had gifted me, and it was the first time that I was able to just kind of come up for air. You know, when you're in the midst of something in a job that might be taking a lot from you, it's hard sometimes to see and think about what you really want. And I actually tried to give myself that time in the space. And I literally sat down with my notebook. I'm very analog. And I wrote down 2 columns. The first one was, what is this job giving me? And the next column was, what is this job taking from me? And I think at the end of the day, now that it's been 10 plus years moving through these different careers, I've realized that that's really, really important for me, just to be able to sit down and to think, what is it that I prioritize and what does really matter to me? And as long as things are in alignment with my greater purpose and they're not taking away from my mental health, that's when I know I'm in the right place. And so that's one of the things that I use to assess the risk and if it's worth taking. At the end of the day, I just read a book called 4,000 Weeks. I don't know if anyone's read that, by Oliver Burkeman. Really made me think a lot about like my finality in this life, and thinking that, you know, we only have 4,000 weeks. And at the end of the day, if we got to make the most of it count. And so we might as well use that time to do the things that really enliven us, that really align with our soul and our being and what we want to do. And just trust that the universe and your community has your support and has your back in making those leaps and those jumps. And so I'll say the third thing that really helps me assess if the risk is worth taking is just having faith in my community that they will show up for me. So one of the things that has helped me throughout these last 7 pivots is being able to reach out to my community every time I make a pivot. So I don't know how people in my community feel about this, but every time I'm about to make a pivot, I'll send out an email to my community. So these are people like my college friends, my old colleagues, old mentors, managers, etc., people that I've met at events that I really connected with, and I share with them my intention. What is it that my soul really wants to do next? Some communities or some companies that I'm really interested in. And then I just put a blanket call out there. It's like, I'm not asking for a job opportunity, but if you happen to know anyone working at these companies or you know someone in these spaces, I would love to just meet with them and hear their story. And instead of making it like a really cringy networking thing, it's more about knowing who they are as a person and knowing their journey and their lily pad journey to becoming who they are. And I found in the last few pivots, I got there because of these emails, because my community showed up for me. And I feel like that happens a lot in the POC community, especially with Asian Americans. You know, when you see someone else doing something that you've always wanted to do, I don't see it as competition. I see it as proof and evidence that it's possible. So I try my best to do the same thing when someone reaches out to me.
That's fantastic. And I think you brought up a really cool point that the way a lot of us are raised, you know, we have so many ego stuff that covers up our ids. It's really important to kind of get underneath and say, now, do I really want this? Or is it because my mom and dad want me to have this? So I think that's really important to kind of get to your source. I'm going to try to spread it around a little bit. I'm going to jump to Raghu. Raghu, when and what made you realize you needed to pivot from the career path which was expected of you to one of your own determination? And I know you spoke earlier about making it at the worst time, but
Yeah.
you know, what just like, when did you realize that moment that made you realize that you needed to make a change?
Yeah, I feel like, you know, time, I felt like, was one of the biggest factors. It's not until you realize you only have so many hours in the day to do what you really want to do, even as like a side hustle. You know, I just felt like I was getting suffocated with the amount of time I had in the day. And I felt like I was leaving, I started PopShift before I even quit my full-time job. So I felt like I was doing a lot of things kind of half-assed, if I may say, kind of like, with effort that I felt like I could have put more effort in if I just had more time for certain things. So and that like desire every day, I was waking up just feeling like, needing more time to myself, to my goals, and like to focus on what I need to focus on and really learn and grow in that. And I felt like, that was also taking time away from my work as well, where I felt like maybe I wasn't doing as well as I should have at work as well. And, in the little like hurdles that I was able to cross doing PopShift as a side gig, I realized that I was creating opportunities for myself that I didn't even think that like existed, in a world where you're like clueless, no connections, and you're starting to slowly build that. I realized, oh, like maybe I do have a potential here. Maybe I can achieve a little more if I just spend more time here. So I think, time was like a major factor in deciding like, to do it right away. And then also another thing is I realized, like I won't have this as much freedom as I have right now to just kind of quit, leave everything that I have and like, take that huge risk. Because, later on in life with like a family and like, having kids and things like that, I felt like might be much harder to make that pivot then, where, you have a lot more things dependent on you. So, yeah.
I think you bring up an interesting strategy on pivots, is that the side hustle is your mechanism to litmus test potential side hustles and what clicks for you. So I think that's a good piece of advice for everyone in this group that's listening and outside. The side hustle may be the path towards your next pivot. So that's fantastic. I'm going to go to Christine because Mamthaz, you were first. So I'm going to kind of try to mix it up a little bit. Pivots into different areas of specialty within a company can be just as dramatic as any move. What did you consider and how did you make those moves in your career? Because we think it's jumping from this career to that, but moving to different practices and skill sets within a company can be just as dramatic and challenging and risky. So go for it, Ohio State Buckeye.
Yeah. Just like anything else, I would say I knew I wanted to pivot from the HR generalist vertical, right? So I call that the dark side of HR, right? Terminations, employee, discretions, all the bad things don't really make me feel good every day in, day out, right? So I wanted to pivot to something that I enjoyed, which was talking to people. And so I became a campus recruiting manager, and I really, really thoroughly enjoyed that. Not only did I get to meet different cohorts of interns, as well as be that first person potentially giving college graduates their first job, I love that connection, right? I did that for actually 5 years. I never wanted to get to the experience level recruiting because it was so like, not as fun, because when you're recruiting for executive hires or experienced hires, it's all about money. It's all about, the title and all this stuff. But like when you're talking to about to be graduating college, you're talking to these seniors really excited, they have that hunger, they have that drive still, that like, oh yeah, this is why I'm in this industry, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then, because of that, I took a self-evaluation and I really wanted to try something else, get out of my comfort zone. And through networking within our company, I found a project management role within our global business development team, essentially, and just made the connections. I saw the job posting. I met with the hiring manager, asked about it, inquired it, did all the HR steps that you need to when you internally move into a different practice. And, really just, we talk about branding yourself, right? Really just branded myself and my skill sets and how those skill sets are transferable to project management, right? And then from there, really when COVID hit, my role changed from project management more to like production. Can't really go more in depth with that because it is new business, but I find myself very excited every day at work still. And it's going to be 8 years this fall. And I'm really proud of that. I would say I'm the first college graduate within my family. First generation, eldest out of 9 grandkids. My mom came here when she was 16, grew up in the Midwest, and, I was the first college graduate. And again, I took that 5-year gap break. So it wasn't the conventional route, but I knew I wanted to work for a company and like be loyal to that company. You hear about people job hopping around because to get that next title, to get that merit raise that they need, or they're just not happy. I think for me, I guess you could call it my American dream. I've always wanted to like be with an organization and have longevity and grow within that and like find my way and make my own path within one agency or one company. Some call me foolish, but it's just, I always say it's like my American dream. I just want to have that longevity and that loyalty to a company / someone. And it really does matter who you work with and who you reach out to network and, be your tribe, be your village, because it is hard. So I'm definitely, I'm very grateful. Let's just put it that way.
Fantastic. I almost did the classic talk with on mute thing. So I feel like I've had a lot of time to train myself not to do that anymore. 5 years seems to be a magic number for you, Krystie. I think it was 5 years as a recruiter, 5 years. Yeah, that's amazing. I think I'm going to go to Mamthaz now. What were the most unexpected, both positive and negative, outcomes of making the change in your career, Mamthaz?
Well, change in itself is scary, right? But change can be rewarding as well. So I think sometimes you have to make changes, not because you want to make them, you choose them, but because the circumstances drive you to make those changes. So I have made changes in my career because of both reasons. Sometimes because of something else, something that is external, that I had to choose something, and sometimes because something looked interesting, something looked greener on the other side, I've made those choices. The biggest positive that I feel of any change is the learning, the perspectives. When you make changes, you meet new kind of people. And when you meet new kind of people, there's so much to learn, right? From professional side to, nuances. And I've traveled into different continents, different countries, the cultural aspects, the nuances. It makes you a totally different person. I grew up in a really small town in a rural, semi-rural part of India. And, coming out from there and, meeting all these people, I think, because I was able to make those choices by, voluntary or involuntarily, I was able to grow as a person. I think that's the biggest positive outcome that I see of making changes. In terms of negative, I feel it's just the teething trouble that every time you make a change, there is this period where you're feeling like an imposter because you've taken up something that you are not an expert on. So that part is there. You feel like you're faking it until you make it. But then there is also times when you're afraid to ask questions. So there's two different ends, right? One, you're making project yourself as very confident. The other one is, you're being very scared because you don't know, should I ask, should I not ask? And in the early part of my career, there was no Google, or Google was not as much easily accessible. I said I started as a mainframe programmer. You can imagine how old I am. So yeah, I mean, it was tough. I was scared to ask questions. That was in the early part of my career. So those were the negatives of making those changes and learning from my mistakes. Now it's much easier. I feel more open. I feel like, there is seeing this allyship, you can talk to people I did not even know in the early parts of my career. So those were some of the negatives of making those changes, but then, we all learn and we move on. So I think in hindsight, I wouldn't have changed anything that I've done. I'm happy and proud of all the changes that I've made.
That's amazing advice. I think the point you made about the fact that whatever pivot or change you made had negatives, but they were all about growing pains. They were not things that defined your happiness in that new role, and they always went away or they were always overcome. So it feels like any pivot, if you make the choice, can always end up benefiting you. So I just have a couple of questions. One question, I think Krystie brought up a thing about filial piety. I was curious to ask you all, when you made your critical move where you diverted from the path that your parents expected from you, how did you handle it? What was your experience like? And did they end up coming around?
I can answer.
Yeah, jump in.
Quickly. Yeah. I'm trying not to laugh. I was on mute because when I left corporate for the first time in 2019, it literally took me 5 months to tell my mom that I had left. So I was basically so stunned into fear that, the Asian mom worrying would just leap out. And I was struck with a lot of guilt that I had been making these like foolish choices or these like really reckless choices. And knowing that like my mom, who's a single mother, like sacrificed so much to give me this immense privilege to be able to, switch these jobs and, pivot out of corporate. So it took me a long time to finally tell her. It took me literally 5 months. And the time when I finally called her to tell her, I had literally written down again in a notebook, like 5 different backup plans. So I was like, okay, this is plan A. This is what I'm going to do. This is how much financial runway I have. And if that doesn't work, I have plan B, C, D, and E. And by the time I finished, she was actually very calm. And she just said, I trust you. And I was so shocked. I think I was more shocked to hear that than anything else. But she was just like, I trust you. You wouldn't have gotten to where you were today if you didn't do the hard work. You're living 3,000 miles away from home. Like you wouldn't be able to do this if you weren't independent. And I'm sure you wouldn't have made this decision if you hadn't thought through it. So I trust you. But, like every Asian parent, she also was like, but I just want to make sure, do you have enough money to eat and to pay for your rent? Which is totally fair. And I think that goes to one of the questions that I think maybe Van had thrown into the chat, which is like, how do you manage the risk of pivoting? And for me, it was the financial stability element. I think that's really critical. I don't believe in the millennial mantra of like, just do what you love and like, fuck the rest. And screw the rest, because at the end of the day, you still need to pay for your rent. You still need to pay for food. And so before I even put in my 2-week notice to leave corporate, I went into my bank account and I calculated and I did budgeting to see how much money do I have? How much money will I need in order for me to feel stable and secure financially to make this leap? Because if you're worried about paying your rent and paying all of these things, you're not going to be able to focus creatively on the things that you want to build. So I do think that's a really real thing. But yeah, anyway, to answer your question, Paul, my mom ended up being very supportive. And then when I left again this time around in February, she was really supportive again, because she's like, you did it once, you can do it again. So I think it's one of those things where you learn to trust yourself and also to learn that your parents will also trust you, because at the end of the day, they just want you to be happy and they can see when you're struggling at a place that really doesn't wake you up, really doesn't fill your soul. And if you really love something, you'll probably be really good at it too. And you'll probably be very successful.
Great answer. Anyone else want to jump on that one?
Yeah, I feel like I have a similar story, but whenever I was switching jobs career-wise, I felt like I would be very open to telling my parents about those changes and like kind of, hey, I'm switching to this other job. I'm still making money. So, it was definitely easier to do that. But when I actually decided to quit my job, I didn't tell my parents. I was just I just made sure, that I was mentally okay to make this move and I'm not going to stress myself out like an insane amount by making this move and then quickly go back to getting a job again. Cause I'm like, in this like clueless space, I definitely made sure that I had like the right intentions, I guess. And like, I was doing this as a side hustle, making connections for like over 3 to 4 years before I even like made that transition. So from that standpoint, it gave me a lot of confidence. Like, I think we were talking about how getting those like little ounces of confidence from your side hustle can actually like motivate you to kind of take that leap of faith when the time is right. So my parents still don't know, but I think recently they've kind of figured it out maybe, but like they don't really ask me too many questions because I don't ask I'm not asking them for money. I think that's like one of the main factors for them to be like, okay, he's okay to like doing his own thing, and trust that, I guess.
That's great. Krystie, Mamthaz, do you have anything to add that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I was just going to add my experience here. Like, I was the first girl in my family who went to college. Most of the people in my family, they wouldn't go beyond 7th grade, 8th grade. My mom went to school until she was in 5th grade, I think. Like I said, we came from a very conservative background, rural and all of those things. So I was the first one. So when I went, my father was very supportive of the whole thing. And, he was very proud that I went and I got an engineering degree and all of those things. And then, I got a job as a software engineer in a very reputed firm in India. And it was very prestigious to be in there. And then the first time I wanted to change my job, it was tough. I used to be the kind of person who would discuss everything with my dad before I made decisions in life, because he was my sounding board. He was very supportive. But then that was the first time I had not discussed anything with him, because I knew he would be worried, he would stress for me. And then I had this whole responsibility of being a role model. It was a tough one. For the entire family looked up to me, both boys and girls, look at her, that's the kind of thing, you kind of burden that you kind of carry when you do something different. And then I had to ensure that and it was a significant change. So I had to ensure that I'm not doing something stupid. So the only thing that I ensured was that, I had the financial stability just in case things did not go really bad, just in things went bad, then, I had that, and I didn't have to, look really like it's something that you have to worry about, because it's not easy. It's not like, I can go back to my dad, because we all came from like really lower middle class kind of families in India. So it was tough. So, I mean, I think I remember that time in, in my career when I did not make that first major decision in my life was made without any consultation with my dad. And it was more of conversations with friends and colleagues and allies, whom I had that. So it is a risk that you take, right? Like, but then luckily it paid off, and, everybody still looks up.
No, that's fantastic. Christine, how about you? Any interesting stories on that with parents?
As far as parents, I'm very blessed. My mom has been very supportive. And the biggest thing for her was she always wants my sisters and myself to be happy, no matter what. So I would say, again, I'm very grateful and blessed to have a supportive family. I would say that everything that this panel has said so far, when you calculate the risk, when you know it's time to do it, I'm very much like Krystie. Don't be like the stereotypical, like, oh, I'm just going to do it, whatever I want stuff. I mean, you're an adult. You have to be financially stable. You need to watch out for yourself, because if you don't, then no one else is going to, especially if you're going to take a big risk. So I do think, whoever has a side hustle, or if you're unhappy at a job, just make sure you take care of yourself before you do anything, before you pivot. Financial stability is important, especially if you're going to do a big change. And then also make sure that you really evaluate your options, and because, just completely quitting might not be the answer. But yeah.
Cool. I think it's interesting because, sometimes you don't have the luxury of having a financial cushion, and it's about actually deciding to give up a lot of things and, scale back your life. and make that decision. And is it worth it? I think everyone here would agree it's worth it. And the one thing I wanted to let people know who are listening, and there's such a level of empathy of folks who've made the pivot that if somebody asks me for help, like I'm in there. Like it's not that weird competitive thing where like I don't care, like I don't want them to be as successful. Like I'm like, if you're gonna go for it, I'll do whatever I can. I'll connect you with somebody to interview with that role or be able to talk to. So I know part of this AIA summit, we're creating connections and LinkedIn profiles, and you have an opportunity to kind of put your information and contact info in. So we're not going to be able to answer all the wonderful questions that we have on the panel. We have about 12 minutes left. I'm going to start jumping into the questions, and panelists just jump in and answer whenever you want. Maybe this is more for Christine, but how do you approach your manager about joining a different team?
Have an honest, candid conversation. I'm sure a lot of people can relate. Some people have crappy managers. Some people have great managers. I think you just need to take a step back and make the conversation more about your career and not so personal, right? It's nothing that they've done, or if it is even, I mean, just hold your, keep face, but it's more of making sure you're transparent with them, right? You do that self-reflection, you be honest with yourself, and then have your bullet points in your talk track as to why you want to move, right? And then again, make those bullet points in those talk tracks not personal related. Relate them to what your next move is, like the actual role and why you want to, go there and take it there. And, sometimes people aren't going to react in the nicest way when you tell them that, right? No one likes to say, oh, I don't like your team, I'm going to go to another team, right? But at the end of the day, you can't help how they're going to react to what you want. You have to believe that what you want is more important than what other people are going to perceive you or feel a certain way if you say you want to leave. And that's okay. Again, it's just more of taking care of yourself and just being mindful and transparent with yourself and with your manager and your team.
I think that's great advice. And I think it's important to put those points down so you stay on point, because I've noticed being in the other side of those situations, especially with Asian employees, they're so immediately jump into please you mode or not make you feel bad mode that they forget to stay true to what their objectives are. So I think you have to be very clear on that. I'm going to jump to, there's like these, when I look over this way, it's my other screen with all the questions that are popping up. So how do you make a career change when you're late in your career and you have to essentially start from the beginning in terms of salary? I mean, going from a corporate job to a startup, you probably had a significant change in salary, but that's a question going out to the panel. Anybody want to jump on that?
You're never too
I feel
old.
like,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh yeah.
Go ahead. No, you go for it. Yeah.
No, I guess I was going to have a different perspective on this anyways. I was going to say that, when you do make a pivot and you're not really in that industry, or like, you have to know that it's going to take time for you to learn. And that's a sacrifice that I feel like I've had to make, is like going from a salary to like no salary. So it's kind of, just knowing that, okay, I'm going to put all this hard work in and it's going to be worth it, is kind of one of those things that has to come from internally, I guess, whether it's from confidence in things that you did, or like, projects that you won, or, things that you were a part of. But I feel like, there is definitely like some sort of sacrifice that I feel like you're going to have to make when pivoting, whether it's the learning curve, or whether it's the salary standpoint or the experience standpoint. So,
Great points. I think that kind of, I don't know if anybody wants to add to that.
I just wanted to say that, oh, sorry, Paul. I just wanted to say that, we need to assess why you're making this change. right? I mean, that's the question that I ask. Why if I'm choosing the change, why am I making the change? And what are the, what is the risk benefit analysis here? So if your salary is the gift there, then what does it take? So, and sometimes we always think of, immediate results, immediate gratification, instant gratification, right? I always keep telling myself when they're especially when things are tough, then I keep telling myself, my career is not about this year, the next promotion, or the next 3 years. It's not even about the next 10 years. It's a long way, right? It's 30 plus years, maybe 40 years of your life. That's what your career is. And you need to put things in perspective and do things that make you happy, because I sometimes forgone things that we typically chase because I love doing something. And in the long run, it all evens out. I feel that's the mantra that I have always, and it helps me be less stressful in every situation, I feel. So, I mean, it took time for me to train myself, because in the beginning I was very pushy and very ambitious and all of that. But then, I kind of trained myself into think the longer term, what the bigger holistic picture of family and well-being and all of those things. So sometimes if it's about a salary, if you have to take a little bit of a cut because you're going to do something that you love to do, go for it and assess that. And in the long run, it'll make you happy. That's how I have dealt with situations.
Yeah, I keep thinking of that. I don't know what movie it was where Tom Hanks or the old guy becomes the intern. I forget what it was. An airplane movie.
Or there's another one with Robert De Niro, right? And Anne Hathaway.
That's it, Robert De Niro.
Right?
Yeah, Anne Hathaway, Robert De Niro.
It's never too late, right? I think when you come from that perspective, or you're going to go through that pivot, a lot of it is kind of not ego, but like, is it like, oh, like, but I've already done this, or I've already done that. It's just like, it's just an opportunity for you to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, because pivoting in any direction, whether you're going promoting up, or you're taking lateral, or you're, completely starting all over again from the bottom, you're going to be uncomfortable some way, somehow. And it's about getting comfortable with that and being okay with that in your own skin and how you're going to do it. There's no one size fit all. Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it's keeping your eyes on the prize, right? Keeping focus on the reason you made the pivot and reminding yourself that's what you're going for. Now, if you've made the pivot and that's not happening, then that's something to reconsider and try to think about how that's going. I have this one question that I wanted to ask you guys. How do you manage the risk of pivoting? How do you talk yourself out of just going for the safe and stable route?
Well, Mamthaz mentioned the knowing your why. I think that's really critical, because to continue what you were saying, Paul, I think it's okay also if you don't exactly know what you want to pivot to next. I feel like my career has been a process of elimination. I'll try something, figure out I don't really like this, or there's elements of this that I like instead. And as I keep going, I keep whittling it down to something closer and closer to what I think I really want. And I think with these pivots too, sometimes it's easy to be like, I need to go to exactly to point B or point Z right away. But actually there's a lot of other things, like little pivots and turns that you can make along the way that make it really fruitful. And so for me, I always ask myself, is this pivot taking me a little bit closer or a little further from the life that I want to be living or to be building? And I know you all had a session with Nicole Cruz earlier. She actually was my life coach in 2020. But she talked a lot around that, is visualizing the life that you want. And whatever pivot or decisions that you're making, even though it may not be exactly the life that you want right now, is it getting you at least a little bit closer? And so I think reminding yourself of your why or your North Star will help you, because a lot of times it's about filtering out what isn't helpful, or filtering out what is a distraction into getting to where you want to go. And when it comes to a side hustle, I think the big thing too is you're going to work the midnight oil for that. You're going to burn that. I'm sure Raghu can talk about that too. And especially when you're working a 9 to 5 and you have a 5 to 9, I think the why is even more critical, because that's the passion and the burn that's going to help you stay up that late, to find the right people to build on your team. And also if you don't feel that kind of passion, then maybe, I don't know if there's a hot take, but maybe it's not the thing maybe that's not the thing you want to pursue. Maybe that's not the thing that you want to transform into a full-time hustle.
I think that's a great point. And I think it's important to also note that career pivots most of the time, and this is my personal experience, are not perfectly mapped out. They never happen. And it's about kind of saying, this brings me a step closer to where I want to be, and I don't want to be here. You know, it's that simple. And I think it's particularly Asian to say, okay, if I'm going to do the pivot, I'm going to map this out. This is my 3 to 5 year plan. And if I don't hit these KPIs, I'm gonna pivot back. And it doesn't always work that way. I'm gonna keep going with some questions. This is an interesting question for Krystie, or actually Christine. The new shift with Publicis Global made the unique role a smoother pivot for you. And do you have any tips from the dark side of recruiting?
The new shifts within Publicis Group Global made a unique role. You know, I don't know if that's referring to like Marcel, which is like our internal kind of AI platform, which, you know, really helped save a lot of jobs during the pandemic because it gave us that global community and reach for projects. But my pivot happened way before coronavirus into the new role. And I would say, yes, working for a company that is as big as Publicis and having a global reach does help. But at the end of the day, we're all some way, somehow in the advertising industry or trying to get into the advertising industry or back into it. It's a small community. It's a small world. I think I really truly believe in the five people of separation. I mean, there's people that I hear, Suji, I see you. She's an old family friend, but you know, I just feel like it helps to be, but don't be discouraged if you're not with a big company. It's all about how you work your internal network at your smaller company and who they know and how you go about networking yourself. I wouldn't say recruiting's the dark side of HR. I meant HR generalist stuff. So like firing somebody is not fun, doesn't feel good. Before I got even to advertising, I was in corporate dentistry doing HR generalist work and mediations, and it weighed down on my soul, like literally weighed down on my soul to go terminate somebody. You know, I mean, I'm not doing it, it's my bosses and it's the company, but I just knew I didn't want that. I feel too much for other people, and I knew it was not going to be a good route for me. So I switched industries to advertising. I like the generalist side, but then I really found my niche with campus recruiting, and just, again, going back to talking to young students and really not ever losing that drive or fire, because every year, right, there's a graduating class, an internship cohort coming in, and they're all hungry. They all have that. They're not jaded by corporate America. And that's what I really liked about campus recruiting. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question right, Keith.
Oh.
I just word vomited there, but yeah.
No, I think all of it was cogent. So we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes, and I just wanted to give the panel a chance, if you had any parting advice to give folks regarding a career pivot. I know we talked about a lot of advice already, but if you had one thing to impart to someone deciding on a career pivot, what would you give? Maybe I'll go Mamthaz. Let's go Mamthaz.
Now, I think I said what I my perspective about it being the long game. And I always also keep thinking to myself, in advertising, we always talk about test and learn, let's go small and let's test and learn. Apply it to our lives, it's okay to make changes. Let's test it. And if it doesn't work, it's fine. Let's pivot. I mean, that's my constant thing, right? So, my advice would be just that, it's okay not to be successful as long as you know what you want in the end, you want to be happy, do the right thing that is right for you. And somebody wise once said that, keep exploring. And when you find that right thing, excel in it and success will follow. So that will be my parting advice.
Oh, I think that's interesting, because a bad pivot can be just as helpful to your life as a good pivot. So I think that's important to recognize, that if you pivot, it might not work out, might suck, but it could be very helpful for you. So anyone else?
I would say find your advocates, not just mentors that can, give you advice and you could talk to and stuff, but find your advocates. Advocates are the ones that have a seat at the table already, that have that exposure. Let them know what you want to do and how they can, potentially help you. But those advocates are going to be the one behind closed doors to raise their hand for you, to fall on that sword for you. And, that's really important to have in your career pivots. And if you're fortunate enough to find those advocates before you do those pivots, it really does give you the empowerment to feel like, okay, I can do this. I have this person in my corner. Start building that community of people that you really trust and respect, and not just like senior leadership though too, because I do feel like advocates could be your peer or someone, not your peer. I mean, they come all shapes and forms, but to get to a point where you want to get to, you got to find somebody at the table for sure.
Yeah. Plus one of the community element. I think that's really, really critical. There's a little tool. I don't even want to call it a tool, but like the way that I approach my community in this context is thinking of them as a personal advisory board. I'm not sure if anyone's spoken about that in previous sessions, but just finding your people who are going to hype you up, that you can go to with your most vulnerable dreams and ideas. And that they can come and be honest with you and they can hype you up throughout the way. Yeah, your hype team, your tribe, whatever you want to call them. But I think the meta piece of advice that I would give that kind of attaches to that is that trust that you have everything and everyone at your disposal to make the pivot of your dreams. I think oftentimes it feels really lonely when you're thinking on making this switch, especially if you're in a space, if you've been in a space for a long time and it feels really uncomfortable to move out of it. Just know that like you have a lot of people, you have people you met here today, you have your advocates, your managers, your community, et cetera. And then you're extremely talented. I mean, there's a reason why that idea has fallen into your brain and that you want to pursue it. And so I'm of the belief that you have everything in there. And also for imposter syndrome, no one knows what they're doing. And if they say that they do, they're lying. So, we're all just trying to figure it out along the way. And there's an incredible book called Everything is Figure Outable that Tina Yip actually recommended to me from our last panel by Marie Forleo. And it's really about breaking down these really big, scary, what seem impossible tasks or ideas into manageable chunks. And everything is figure outable. We have the internet. We have so many different ways of working. Like it's going to be fine and you're going to be great.
Totally. I think we're at time. Raghu, did you have anything you wanted to add? I want to make sure you get a chance.
Just something simple is be patient and work hard if you're gonna go make the pivot. I think that, definitely one of the key things after, you make the decision to move, be patient, work hard, and things will work out eventually.
Well, Krystie caught me. I've been impostered, faking being a moderator, a speaking panel moderator for the last hour. But we did all right. I wanted to thank Mamthaz, Raghu, Krystie, and Christine. And, we talked about community. AIA, that's what it was started for. Bernice and Jesselyn started this because they felt it was a hole in the industry. And, I think it's important to realize that it's a fast growing community. And when you're a part of it, you're creating the future members of your tribe. So I wanted to thank everyone. I think it was a great session. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And we're probably going to have some music until the next session. So it was nice seeing you all. Have a great night.
Thank you.